I'm a 32-year-old guy currently using my GI Bill to go to college in a city in one of the mountain time zone states. I'm so busy with school and work, so I don't have time to go out and socialize often, so I have to rely on a lot of the apps to go on dates. I matched with this really cute girl around my age. We had a good conversation and then we scheduled a date. It was a bar restaurant not far for either of us to drive, so it was easy, and she was very pretty in person and we got along great. During our conversation, I found out that she worked in a non-cop role at the police station, like a receptionist essentially. And I also learned that she had a roommate, whom she said was out of town for the holidays. She added that she hated being alone because she had a crazy ex-boyfriend who stalked her. I was a little uneasy at that and told her as much, and she said that he's harmless, so I kinda let it go. We had a few drinks and were there about another hour, and at her suggestion she said that we go back to her place. And I mean, I wasn't going to argue, she was hot. She then insisted on driving. I told her I was fine, and she said no, that I had been drinking, and she saw too many DUIs at her job. I got what she was saying, but I only had 2 gin and tonics and was fine, and again she insisted. And I thought it was weird, but I didn't care. We went to her house, and she walked up and just opened the door. She didn't unlock it, it was already open, which I found very odd because she said that she had a stalker and that her roommate was gone. She started feeding her cat, and as she was doing that, I saw a bowl of cereal on the kitchen counter. I touched it, and it was still cold, like it hadn't been there for a while. The cereal wasn't soggy either, and I asked her whose it was, and she hesitated and said she ate it as a snack before heading to the bar. It just didn't make sense, and before you could say anything, she just kissed me and put her arms around me seductively and said for me to take her to her room. Again, she was very beautiful, and I just quit caring about that cereal. We started fooling around, and I went to close the curtains, and she told me to leave them open. A few minutes later, maybe 5, we were in bed, and my back was to the window, and she let out a huge gasp, a scared gasp. Her eyes were at the window, and I turned around and saw someone in a hoodie, and they took off. I heard the steps running on her back deck. I immediately jumped up and ran to make sure that her doors were locked, and of course the front door wasn't. I ran to it and locked it, and right when I did, the door started banging. I went to open it because I was going to mess up the dude, or at least try to, and she told me to just go back to her bed with her. I screamed at her and asked her if she was insane, and she told me that he does this and just goes away. And I asked her, You know this is your ex? And she said yeah, and to not worry about it. At this point, he started banging on the side of the house on the other end, and she didn't seem at all scared and kept trying to get me to go back to bed with her. I didn't want to call the cops because, for all I knew, this dude might be a cop, and she'd know the cops that show up and would take her side. I also couldn't just leave because my car was at the bar and I was terrified. At this point, I started calling her out for the door not being locked, the cereal, and I openly called her a liar. She couldn't come up with any logical answers, and I had no idea what I was into. I should have done this, but my fight or flight was pretty much kicked in, and I told her, if this is a robbery or some kind of setup, I promise, I'll kill you both. I'm not some hard ass or anything, but my fear told me to let her know that no matter what it was, they'd have a fight on their hands. And my thoughts of what were going to happen to me were all over the place. I ordered an Uber off my phone and didn't say anything. I just kept arguing with her and asking what was going on, hoping to just keep her talking and in the room. I stayed right next to the door so I could leave ASAP. Luckily, I never got my pants off, and my jacket and shoes were right by the door, so I was able to get dressed. The Uber showed up, and without saying anything, I just opened her door and ran out as fast as I could. I looked back at the door, and she was just kind of standing there. It's only been a little over a month at this point, but I honestly have no idea what in God's name I got myself into. And I don't believe the story of just a girl with a crazy ex based off of the factors I told you. I feel like either a robbery or some weird fetishized cuck type thing was happening. I don't know. Definitely something I'm very mad at myself for letting happen, I mean, I'm a 9-year Navy vet and allowed myself to get into a situation like that. I reported her account on the Uber ride back to the bar, and I told the bartender as well, if they ever saw her, warn the next guy. I've been a listener for years now and enjoy binging episodes while I draw. My girlfriend and I were watching videos earlier, and one talking about how you're likely to walk by 36 serial killers and murderers in your lifetime without ever knowing, and it reminded me of an interaction I had last year with someone who ended up being an attempted murderer. I was attending a small family gathering at my aunt's house for her birthday last summer with my mom and my brother. My aunt is a nurse and works rotation at a hospital in a small community about 2 hours away. And during her few days off back at home, she invited family over for dinner and cake to celebrate and spend time together. She told us that she'd also invited a coworker and her son over as well because they had become good friends while working, so they decided to make the drive. Now, for the sake of the story, I'll just name that friend Kate and the son Chad. We were introduced to Kate and Chad when they arrived, and I know this will sound cliche and that everyone whose story starts similar to this will say next, I immediately got a bad feeling, but for me, it was just a heavy discomfort. I'm very in tune with my surroundings, whether it's a neurodivergent trait of mine or not, it's not important, but I always get a strong read on people from the way their energy shifts when they walk in a room for the first time. They were nice while being introduced, and Kate mainly stuck close to the kitchen to help with food, but Chad veered off and chose to sit on the back deck with my mom, brother, uncle, and my uncle's sister and I. My uncle's sister, who we'll call Tammy, is a talker, and she'll tell you any and every detail about her life, and that mostly includes her tumultuous romantic life. My mom enjoys Tammy's company and having friendly chit-chat about common interests that they share, so that was the dominant conversation for a while. Chad would interject and fit himself in, finding any area to talk about himself. He wanted us to ask more about him, and I got the sense that he was a little self-obsessed and enjoyed being the center speaker. I was actively engaging in the conversation, but I sat there, quietly observing. Soon the conversation veered, and Tammy went off about her most recent love affair, and the man was married and telling her he was going to leave his wife for her, and she went on about how she wants to show up at his house when his wife's home and give him a piece of her mind. And at this point, I noticed how intently Chad was listening to her and how he lit up when he found that this man actually lives in his community. "What's his address? I can show up for you," he asked, while anyone would think this is kind of a harmless joke. Something in the way he looked genuine unsettled me, and this was brushed off as a joke, and the rest of the evening went on fine. All around, Chad seemed like a weird guy, but nothing else caused me to think that he was anything other than that. My mom and I talked about him following the party and how she felt the same way that I did. It wasn't until a few months ago, though, almost a year after meeting him, that I learned something extremely disturbing about Chad that made my blood run cold. Told to me by my aunt as well as a news article, I found that Chad was currently serving a prison sentence for attempted murder of a 17-year-old girl. He was found guilty by a jury and charged with attempted murder, aggravated assault, for offenses that had occurred in the weeks prior. And at the time of the attack, Chad was walking this teen girl home when he became violent and attacked her. He slashed her throat, stabbed her in her side, which caused her to have a 6-centimeter laceration to her liver and a 4-centimeter wound to her diaphragm. He then left her for dead. She survived the attack and later testified against him, and after pleading not guilty on all accounts, he was ultimately sentenced to 3 years in prison. The judge noted that he didn't take any responsibility for his actions and showed any level of remorse when he spoke in court. It was premeditated, and evidence showed texts that he made to a friend of his plans weeks prior. He claimed in those texts that she was corrupt and needed to be put down, among other vile comments. My aunt cut contact with her friend Kate, who ended up denying her son was guilty of any of what he was charged with, and she left that job soon after for unrelated reasons. What makes this all the more disturbing is that this attack happened 2 years prior to my aunt's party, meaning I sat across from someone who actively tried to take the life of a teenage girl in such a vicious and brutal way. He wasn't going to do it. He had already done it, and it just hadn't gone to trial yet. I'm driving home from work last night and was cut off by someone driving like a complete jerk. I live in the United States where driving on the right-hand side is the custom and the left-hand lane on a multiple-lane road is used for faster traffic. I was in the left-hand lane of the two-lane road when a sedan makes a right-hand turn at an intersection, but instead of turning into the right lane that is otherwise unoccupied, this person pulls out in front of me. I try to avoid them and maintain my speed by moving into the right lane to pass, but they again cut me off. At this point, I'm quite annoyed and flash my high beams briefly at them. I move back over into the left-hand lane and pass them. No sooner do I do this, but this person is now tailgating me. I make my way to the intersection that I need to turn at and start in the left-hand lane, eventually moving over to the right and making my right-hand turn. Suddenly, the car moves from the middle lane, where one would continue straight through the intersection, to follow me making a right turn. I'm in the left lane again after turning, and they're still right behind me. There's a red light ahead and I stop, but not before moving to the right lane at the last minute to try and lose the person who I realize is now following me. There's a bank and a bar on my right, and I suddenly change course to go through the parking lot instead of back to my apartment about a block down the street. I'm weaving through the empty parking lot and this person is still right behind me, at which point I realize, ah crap, I'm gonna have to lose this guy before I go home. I reach for my knife in my pocket just in case as well, but I don't have it. I realize that it's in another pocket of some clothes in my laundry basket. This guy is right on my tail and I try to maneuver through the parking lot as quick as I can to lose them. I'm about to turn left to head back toward my apartment or through downtown to lose this guy when I hear a loud pop and think they've just thrown something at my car. No sooner do I realize this when I see a large, nearly perfect circular hole in the front windshield of my car. This person is behind me, and immediately I pick up my phone, hold the button for the automated assistant, and yell, "Call 911." The person behind me has put a bullet hole through my car. I speed past my apartment while on the phone with the dispatcher and into the parking lot of another bank where there are plenty of security cameras. I realize there's a hole in the passenger seat as well, and within minutes, 2 police cars arrive and I get out of the car with my hands up to show them I'm unarmed. When I'm able to look at my car again, I see a bullet hole in the trunk that goes through the back seat, grazes the top left shoulder of the passenger seat in the front, and comes out my windshield. There's broken glass fragments everywhere on the dashboard. 6 inches to the left and the bullet would have gone through my shoulder. 6 more, and any higher, and I wouldn't be typing the story out. I'll keep you guys updated if there are any developments, but the police say that they should be able to use the bank security footage to catch this monster. Update. The day after this event, a Thursday, I received a call from an investigator who was assigned to my case. He told me, "I want to try to recover the bullet," and I think I probably laughed out loud hearing this. "I'm not sure how you want to do that. It went clear through the trunk and out the windshield." And after hearing this, he asked me to come in the following day for forensic ballistics anyways. I worked nights and came in the following evening, Friday at 5 p.m., waited an hour after the receptionist told me he wasn't in, and then left. When I arrived at work for my shift and sat down at my desk, I got a call from the investigator apologizing for not being at the police station. I don't know if you heard the news, but there was another shooting last night at 8 p.m. I was also working that case, and this actually has everything to do with you. He explained to me that there had been a drug deal that went wrong the night before at a nearby gas station, and the one person involved was in the hospital. The same vehicle the officers had identified in my case had been requisitioned as evidence in the second shooting only 22 hours later. I changed my license plate as soon as the tax commissioner's office opened Monday morning. I don't want any of this to come back to me in any way, so I'll keep most of the details out, but here's what I do know. I won't be able to have a case since the bullet couldn't be recovered. More on that shortly. The people involved that shot my car and the other individual who ended up shooting them in the drug deal would all be facing significant felony charges, likely life in prison, with or without the charges my case would have added. I don't know yet if the shooter in the hospital will survive, but it will determine a lot about the nature of the charges. I won't say anything else about that for a number of reasons, but let's just say that there have been a lot of bizarre coincidences that followed. The bullet was a relatively large, high-velocity rifle round, so the bullet trajectory showed no deviation in the path of the travel through the entire vehicle. There was a perfectly straight line in the ballistic rods from the trunk, through the seats, all the way to the exit point in the windshield. If the bullet had hit me, well, I'd rather not think about that. Even if it only hit my shoulder in the spot where it passed through the passenger seat, it would have meant massive trauma. I definitely consider myself very lucky to have walked away from that, uninjured. About 2 weeks ago, I booked an Airbnb in another country. I was going there for a concert. The room was cheap, so I knew that I wasn't going to stay in a 5-star hotel, but it was only for one night, so I didn't mind as long as I had a bed. And to start off, it already wasn't a great trip because my data roaming apparently didn't work in that country at all. I logged into a cafe Wi-Fi and planned my route in advance as best I could, and I managed to be at the house in time and rang the only bell and waited. Nobody came out. I repeatedly rang and waited 5 minutes, and I noticed the door had a slot for mail and looked through it. And I was shocked to see an entrance that looked like an abandoned barn. A super dusty couch right in front of the door, pieces of furniture covered in cloth, very dirty and extremely old, and I usually love old houses, but that just did not look like a house that was in use or prepared for guests at all. I wondered if I was at the wrong house and what to do now. As a super old, unwashed-looking guy walked towards the door from the street, I asked him if he knew where the Airbnb was, and he mumbled something which I interpreted as positive, so I asked him if he was Tim, my host, and he said yes and opened the door for me. Well, I already described the entrance. The centerpiece was definitely the super old creaky staircase that led to the upper part of the house, and I followed him upstairs. He was heaving and coughing and stinking of cigarettes, which wasn't exactly pleasant, but fine, I guess. And the second floor was also abandoned looking, super dark, with clustered furniture hung with cloth and randomly thrown together in a super creepy curtain that I couldn't catch a glimpse behind. Another stair up, and we were in my hallway, which was honestly the worst one. Cracks in the wall, old rural paintings and crosses hung up next to them. It seriously looked like the set of a horror movie. I usually don't have a problem with decor like that. I'm a goth, so anything darkly inclined is my jam. But everything looked so badly taken care of, so I got major creepo vibes from this house. He showed me to the bathroom, which had a huge hole missing in the bathtub tiling in the wall, and everything looked super dirty. He showed me to the bedroom, which was honestly okay, and there was just a lot of creepy dolls on the shelves that just completely threw me off, but the bed seemed fine. I asked him if they had Wi-Fi, and he said no, which sucks. And I really hoped that they would have that because that meant that I would have no way to communicate in there. And I also asked him when the checkout was the next day, and he said it doesn't matter, whatever that meant. He then dragged himself up to the 4th story, which was in complete pitch-black darkness, by the way, so that obviously gave me weird vibes too. I definitely didn't want to get in the shower, so I just quickly changed and charged my phone. When I went to the bathroom, I realized that I didn't even notice the creepiest part. There were no locks at all. Not for the bathroom, not for the toilet, and not for my room, which freaked me out, and I also noticed that there were so many half-used items that someone, looked like guests before me, had left there, like shower gels and toothbrushes and toothpaste. A random lash curler just lay abandoned on the shelf, not sort of like a here you go for your use in case you forget yours way, but it just looked like someone left it and nobody bothered to clean it away. I already made up my mind that I would definitely not be staying the night in this house. My mind was just kind of spinning with different scenarios. What if all of these products were left by people before me? And why did nobody leave horrendous reviews because they all got murdered? I was super spooked and seriously debated if I should take all my stuff to the concert because it did not feel safe in the slightest. But my back was really hurting from my heavy backpack, so I just took my essentials and left the room as soon as I could, not without sliding a folded paper under the door so I'd see if someone tried to open it in my absence. When I was coming down the stairs, I heard someone turning a key in the front door. I was a bit confused, but in the advertisement it said that a couple lived there, so I expected to see a sort of wife or girlfriend of the guy I'd already met. Instead, a middle-aged man enters and says, "Hi, I'm Tim." All I could think of is, then who is that other guy? And I was pooping myself inside, but I had brief small talk with him and finally left the house. And I was quite shook. Luckily, I made it in time to the venue and the concert was worth it. And afterwards, I was so tired that I knew that I couldn't stay awake for the whole night, so I checked into a hostel. That was also not perfectly clean, but at least they had Wi-Fi and a proper shower and a door that had a lock. And the next day I got thrown out at 10 a.m., so I made my way to the rest of my stuff. I don't know why, but I checked the mail slot again and jumped back. The old guy was just snoring on the couch directly in front of the entrance door. The strangest part about him was that he was now wearing, and I'm not joking when I say this, a Snorlax onesie. You know, like the Pokemon? And even stranger, I saw that he was hooked up to oxygen, some tank which was slightly sprawled out across the floor, the line leading up to his nose. And I had to sneak past him to get my stuff. I went upstairs, and my door was left slightly open, which I thought was very strange. As I gathered my things, I noticed the hair curlers now smelled like they'd recently been used, almost like that burnt hair smell that you get from too much heat on hair. And at that moment, I didn't wait around to find out or ask if someone had been in my room. I quickly grabbed my stuff and tried to silently bolt back down the stairs to the door. I wasn't really paying attention as I made a direct line for the exit, and I accidentally tripped over the old guy's oxygen tubes, ripping them out of the tank. It immediately let out a loud hissing sound, and the old man woke up almost instantly, gasping for air. In that moment, I panicked. I didn't know what to do. I was so freaked out that I just said "I'm sorry" a million times and ran to the door, threw it open, and bolted out. I don't know if I overreacted, but honestly, from the beginning with those two guys to the missing locks and a checkout like that, if I had assumed the worst, this could have been the perfect setup to assault or murder someone. In best case scenario, nothing would have happened, but I probably would have had panic attacks all night. Usually I love solo traveling, but this all was just way too much. I'm not sure if this is going to be interesting of a story since it happened at such a young age that the story had to be relayed on to me through family. But when I was around 1 to 2 years old, me and my sister were at her aunt's house. My mom and myself and my sister were outside in the front yard, and she said that she needed to go inside for something and left my sister outside with me. My sister was around 5 to 6 at the time and should have never been put in charge of a baby. Anyway, during this time, she had left and it was just the two of us outside. Apparently, someone had grabbed me, and no one noticed until my mom came back outside and I was nowhere to be seen. They immediately freaked out, and my uncle of the time had drove around the area searching for me. He had a feeling about who he knew it was and was on the verge of breaking into the guy's house because he banged on his door multiple times and was ignored. My aunt must have talked him out of it because they ended up just going back home and called the police. When the cops got there, they drove around and ended up finding me multiple blocks away, just standing outside of the very house my uncle said was the guy. They never made any arrests on the guy, and I don't even think they questioned him. My family says that they think once he heard the sirens coming, he panicked and just left me outside to be found because there was no way a baby that just recently started walking could have wandered that far off on my own. Religious delusion. The term delusion refers to a strong, consuming belief in something that is untrue. Religious delusions involve beliefs concerning religious ideologies or figures. Psychosis refers to a collection of symptoms that affect the mind, where there has been some sort of loss of contact with reality. Now, forgive me if this post is a bit scrambled, I just wanted to give some context. I'm on my third glass of wine and contemplating life right now. My brother, Brian, and I grew up very close. Movie nights with the family, family dinners, game nights, holidays, family road trips, all very normal stuff. And we eventually grew up and now, both in our 20s, moved away from home. I haven't seen him recently, but we text here and there to confirm aliveness, and Brian suddenly became extremely religious nearly overnight. I'm talking extremely religious. Now, I don't judge anyone, but no one in our family is particularly religious, and he does not have religious friends. He found a church in his new city that he is giving his life to, and he is completely isolated and his only friend is the priest. He is secretive about what church it is, and he spends all of his time there, I guess. Brian is there late night every day, supposedly helping clean up, but that just doesn't sit right with me. They took a missions trip to Mexico recently, and I can only imagine what in the world went on there. The only media that he consumes is religious, and he has no friends outside of the church, and he only goes to church outside of work. Before ending each conversation, he will ask, "Are you ready to give your life to God or suffer in hell?" So, you can at least see what I'm experiencing on my end. It's all very strange. He recently took a trip back home to visit our family. My mom says the whole thing just felt wrong. He sat silent much of the time, observing. Otherwise, he looked far removed even while looking right at her. His energy filled the room and made her uncomfortable, and he was no longer the bubbly and affectionate guy that he's always been. He kept his distance and had nothing to say, and when he left, she said that she doesn't expect that he'll actually come back. Once a month, we catch up by playing video games together. We'll play for hours, and this is sort of our bonding time, and I entertain his religious conversations regardless of my opinion. Our last game night, he had so much fun that he wouldn't let me log off until about 2 a.m., and I recently found out that he gave his console away to a church member. I was upset. It felt like he didn't think about what that meant. We are not the phone call types, but we love video games and played growing up together, so game nights were perfect. He called me the other night to address that issue. He gave it away because his future wife, a premonition by the way, is coming, and she wouldn't like him playing with other girls, and he doesn't have time for anything except the church. I know this sounds absolutely too insane to be real, but unfortunately, it is. He assured me that he will be completely cutting me off because his premonition wife is more important than his relationship with me, his family. He spoke with such clarity that it was terrifying to be so deluded yet so sure of yourself. What type of church influences you to cut off family and friends? Apparently he'll be moving overseas to find his so-called premonition wife soon, and I was shocked. Premonition? Really? Our dad called him, and when he asked, "For you to need to cut your sister off, you must feel for her in another way than as your sister." And Brian avoided the question and didn't answer. Yeah, I know. How could it get worse than a premonition wife? Well, I'm sick for many reasons. Losing sleep, and I fear that my brother is in some sort of cult while under some sort of religious psychosis, on top of ruining our relationship with possible feelings towards me, his sister, and I'm a mess of confusion. What in the hillbilly F is going on, and how could it get worse? My mother believes it's his attempt at removing the temptation, aka me, from his life, and I'm stuck between wanting to understand what the hell type of church this is, and also agreeing, let's not meet. No one knows what to say to me, and I can't blame them. I'm mourning what was once our relationship, but the situation gives me chills, and I don't know where to go from here. All I can think of is this one quote that I read before. The more devout they are, the uglier their faith will become, since it's all based on a lie. My encounters with this individual, who I'll call Ben, began in November 2024 in school. He was a friend of one of my friends, Tom, and eventually we became part of the same friend group. I've always found Ben a bit creepy, which seemed to be the school population's general view towards him. However, once we began regularly socializing, I began to feel bad for my presumptions. That was until we were added to a WhatsApp group chat, and that was when things started to turn. First, it was the constant mindless images of gore that he would send, pictures involving torture victims and murdered children. I don't know if the images were real, but they made me very uncomfortable, and I asked him to stop, and he responded by telling me to take a joke and to stop being a baby. And after that, he began sending messages claiming that he had killed a cat, along with disturbing fantasies involving people I knew. I wasn't sure if Ben was just your typical edgelord, which is what my other friends thought, but something about it didn't feel right. Then, one Saturday, I was alone Christmas shopping in town when I noticed Ben standing down the road, just sort of staring directly at me. I waved at him awkwardly, but he just kept staring before casually walking into a side street. For the rest of the trip, every time I turned around, Ben seemed to be there, always at a distance and always staring. And eventually I gave up shopping and went home, kind of angry, and I texted him about it, and he just said that he didn't know what I was talking about. Later, during lunch at school, Ben and another friend, Jack, convinced me and a third friend, Zach, to come with them into the forest behind our school. It was stupid, I know, but I was bored and decided to go. And as we ventured deeper into the woods, Ben started acting strange, laughing and repeating, "Closer, closer." Eventually, both Zach and I agreed that it was creepy and decided to head back. And Ben seemed pissed when he and Jack returned. And when we asked why they wanted us to keep going, Ben said he wanted to set a fire and show us. And after that, I distanced myself and left that group chat, though I was eventually re-added. While I was on break from the group, Ben attacked Tom at school with a homemade blade, and I believe it was a razor from a pencil sharpener. Tom ended up with a wound near his wrist, and Ben was expelled from school, though no legal action was taken. And it's been about a month since then. When I was re-added to the group, I found that Ben had been sending graphic photos of himself doing things to himself and ranting about how he hates his family, blaming them for his misfortunes. I'm genuinely worried. He gives off killer vibes, but maybe I'm just being paranoid, and I often think about that time in the forest and in the town plaza. Anyways, should I be concerned or am I just overreacting? Sometimes I worry that Ben knows where I live and that he's not far away. So last summer, I was almost kidnapped. I usually walk around my neighborhood, sometimes biking, but mostly on foot, and as I was walking, listening to music, a car pulled up beside me. Since I was near someone's house, I didn't think much of it and assumed it was their house that they were pulling up to. But I was wrong. And just to give you an idea of the difference in the size between me and this guy, I stand at 5 feet 115 pounds, while he looked to be around 6 foot 3 inches tall, 180 pounds. As he came out of his car, he started a conversation with me, saying something like, "Hey, where you headed?" And I responded with a very short and curt, "Just walking around." He then said, "It's pretty late. You want me to give you a ride home?" I declined, saying, "No thanks, I don't live in this area." And after I made this statement, he looked at me and asked why I was walking alone. I simply ignored him and quickened my pace, causing him to speed up as well. Eventually, I came across a house with its garage open, and without thinking, I ran in, seeing an older man sitting in there. I told him that someone was following me and to please help me, and he got up and started yelling at the man following me, telling him to F off and saying that he had a gun. That guy retreated back to his car and just sped off. I thanked the garage man, and he told me to stay safe. And that night, I ran as fast as I could back to my home. Throughout the story, I would like for all of you to keep in mind that I was 20 years old and very naive. You're going to think that I'm stupid, and I know I was. Probably lucky to be alive, and God do I know that, and I kick myself whenever I think about this to this day. I just wanted to get some other opinions. Maybe I'm wrong about him. So about 20 years ago, I was walking down the road in a not-so-great area. It was summertime, and I was dressed appropriately for the heat, shorts and a tank top. I'm very thin and was downright skinny, and I've gotten mistaken for a lady of the night more times than I care to admit, and this may or may not be important to the story. So anyways, I was walking to pick up my son from daycare, and as I'm going about my way, a truck full of men started to catcall and follow me. They turned around several times to yell at me out of the window, and I was getting nervous about it. I was passing a gas station parking lot, and a man not much older than myself stopped in a nice car and asked if I would like a ride. He didn't seem scary, and he was attractive, so I said okay and got in his car. Sheesh, I wish I could smack myself now. So I get into the car with him, and he asks where I'm going. I tell him it's about a mile straight down the road that I'm on, and he starts going the wrong way and just tells me he needs to turn around, and I pay very little mind to it. He starts to ask me about myself, so I tell him. I was escaping a DV situation and was staying in a woman's shelter nearby. I was telling him how closely my activities were monitored and that I was due to pick up my son any minute. I think this may actually be what saved me. And at some point I notice that he takes another wrong turn, but I don't know the area at all, so when I point it out, he says that he's taking a shortcut or something, and I just go back to talking like an idiot. Then, I get a whiff of something. I know now that the smell was death, decompositional death. And I know this for sure now. I didn't then, though. I turn around and look in the back seat, looking for spoiled food or something like that, and the car is absolutely spotless. I bring up the smell and he brushes it off and changes the subject, but for some reason the smell just started getting stronger. My stupid self brings it up again. What is that smell? And he says he doesn't know, probably something he forgot to take out and has gone bad. When I tell you guys that there was not a crumb in that vehicle, I'm baffled. But eventually he drops me off, safe to my destination, and he doesn't tell me his name, ask for my number, or give me his, and I don't think much of it until much later when I smell that smell again. But this time I know what it is, and it triggers the memory of that guy in the car. This was probably 2005 in Covington, Kentucky, and I'm pretty sure that him being aware that not only would I be missed, I would be missed quickly and my movements would be tracked very specifically was the reason that I made it back out of that car that day. So for context, we live in a 3-family home. My husband and I live on the second-floor apartment, and you would not know where the door is unless you know where the door is. And our stairs are inside a covered porch area, and they're kind of hidden. So an older man with white hair showed up at our door yesterday and knocked on the door. My husband answered, and he started telling us that he was moving into the vacant apartment in the back of the house and that our landlord said that he could wait and move into it in May. Now mind you, we know our landlord well, and no way that she would let the apartment stay vacant until May. And he said he put down a deposit and she was holding it for him. He started asking us all about our utility bills, the landlord's last name and demeanor, to which my husband answered because he thought initially that he was our new neighbor. And he then noted my husband's accent and asked, "Are you a citizen in this country?" And my husband responded yes, and then he started sharing how, it's a good thing illegals are getting deported, and asking my husband political affiliations. The conversation turned kind of weird after that, and we're independents but vote democratically and believe in respecting all people. The man left and proclaimed, "I hope you voted for Trump," as he walked down the stairs. Now, long story short, we texted our landlord and asked if she knew this man and who was renting the back apartment, and she said, "I don't know him. A young mom is renting that apartment." It's safe to say that we are super creeped out, and fast forward, he showed up again today. We bought a door camera and now have him on video. We don't understand who this man is or what his intentions are. Is he some confused old man or someone with bad intentions towards interracial couples? I don't know. I am aware this happened ages ago, but I am now recollecting my bits and pieces from the event and am thankful to be sane and safe. I'm honestly just airing it out so I can get input and opinions because I don't know what to make of it. And I'll preface this by saying that this happened a while ago, 2019, when I was 16 years old, hence I was very naive and gullible. I am aware that it might not be a human trafficking case, but it does seem suspicious regardless. And for context, this happened in a relatively large North American city. It was late December, and a few days before Christmas, I had just finished hanging out with my friends and was using public transit, the subway, to get back home. My friends lived in a different area, so I had to travel back alone in that direction. The subway wagons were mostly empty, it was already dark out, and I recall it being around 8 to 9 p.m., maybe. And I was sitting on an individual seat where the setup was structured in a way that had an other seat perpendicular to my current one, which was empty currently. This one guy, who looked to be relatively young, plopped down on that adjacent seat and greeted me with a smile instantly. I didn't think too much of it at the time, since in all honesty I thought he was cute. Physically, he had a middle-part, chestnut hair and was relatively tall and very slim. Nice facial features too. I don't remember his face in a very detailed manner, but I remember thinking that he was really cute. He was dressed in a sweater and jeans and didn't look dismantled or overly casual either. And upon sitting down, he greeted me smiling, presented himself, and shared his name. We then started making small talk, and he brought up the fact that he had finished university, which made me ask for his age, and he claimed to be 24, which seemed to match with his appearance. What really creeps me out is that in response, I told him that I was 16 years old, and he didn't even seem slightly fazed by that. Matter of fact, he was smirking and had formed a visible grin, talking about how he missed being young and advising me to stay in school. He proceeded with asking me about what I was doing in the metro, my plans before that, and if I had any plans coming up in the next few hours, to which I stupidly answered no. He then started expressing how his friends had come up with a supposed dare, where he had to bring a random girl over, a complete stranger, to their party or hangout by accosting them randomly, such as this very occasion, I guess. I remember finding it hard to believe, so I insisted on going home about a handful of times, to which he started pleading with me, claiming it would be fun, and if I were to be uncomfortable, he would bring me right back to the subway station. I kept insisting that my mom would get mad and asked if there was another day where we could do that, but he answered that it was a one-time thing, that it's a very uncommon gathering, that he hasn't seen these friends in a long time and wouldn't see them after the event, most probably because of a full schedule. And he also kept pushing the fact that he wouldn't be keeping me up for too long. And I eventually gave in. I know, super stupid, and I still can't believe it to this day. And we had to go through a few subway stations and got off in a pretty desolate area which was well known for its drug use and prostitution and poverty. But to be frank, I didn't know that at the time, although it was pretty obvious. The specific neighborhood still has a pretty tarnished reputation to this day. And the guy, Ben was his name, then revealed his real name to be different than the one he initially had given me and was seemingly Slavic. The name he revealed is most likely also fake too, I imagine. And he then started asking me pretty intrusive questions such as, what are your darkest secrets? What's your home life like? What's stressing you out right now? Why did you decide to come along? And he claimed to like getting to know people beyond the surface level, hence why he was being so intrusive all of a sudden. I, in all honesty, was a straight-A student, so I simply told him that studies were my main concern as of now, to which he answered that there had to be more than that. And we had to be about 15 minutes in at this point when a car slowed down next to us and rolled down its windows. A man let out a hey, but was immediately shooed away by Ben. Ben then told me that the man was a supposed John, which I didn't know meant that the driver was essentially a client in that sense. and I started to get wary but still made it to the hangout a few minutes later, which was located in a regular townhouse. It wasn't worn down or anything. I was greeted by maybe 5 to 6 dudes who were seemingly over 25. 2 of them looked above 30 as well, and they all stared me down and immediately asked how old I was, and I told them I was 16. One of the guys seemed sort of phased and let out a, "Come on, man, that's my sister's age. They might even be in the same school." And they all kind of laughed it off and moved on, and then never spoke about it again and barely asked me any questions except, "How'd you guys meet?" Also, it was obvious that someone's dad had owned the place, as an old man was dozing off on the couch, and we all gathered around a dinner table. The host served me some food along with the other guests, but I refused to eat as I was honestly starting to feel a bit queasy about this situation. And after everyone except me finished eating, we all went upstairs. Ben started playing the guitar, and another man joined in by playing some keys on the piano. They then asked me to film them using Ben's phone, so I did. When that was going on, I honestly started getting terrible vibes and felt the need to leave, so I put the phone down and slowly made my way through the frame of the door. One of the older guys was standing near it and asked me what was up and if I was enjoying their company. We started talking for a minute and he claimed to be an accountant. He then was starting to lean in and tried to slightly hover over me against the door frame. However, I stepped back into the staircase and made it to the front door, opened it, and went out to the driveway. Luckily, the door wasn't locked. Ben followed and asked me if I wanted to leave, and I immediately said yeah, and this time, he didn't insist on bringing me back in. I should also add that right before leaving, I had told Ben that my mom was relentlessly calling me and was worried, to which he obliged. On our way back, he proceeded to ask me if I was genuinely 16 and not below that. He told me that if he were my dad, he would never let me out of sight again, because what I just did, which was going to the party in the first place, was the dumbest thing he'd seen any girl do, especially since I had no reason to do that, according to him. Once he accompanied me back to the subway station, I asked him for a Snapchat. I was a complete moron, or any other type of social media he had, and he told me he doesn't use his phone like that and was fully off the grid. I went back home, and I've never heard of him again. Although I didn't get conventionally harassed, like violence or anything else, and it's a pretty outdated happening, I'm honestly scared that I could have been a potential human trafficking victim, and it might be a stretch, but you never know. I want to know if there's any way that I could leave an anonymous tip to the city or something. I was searching through public records, but I couldn't find anything. But what do you guys make of this story? I met them when I was 15. He was 17, and looking back, the signs were all there. It started with small things. Us just roughhousing like buddies. We were both guys, but it would escalate to them taking me back behind the shed where my friends couldn't see and holding me against the wall and fake hitting me, sort of pretending to hurt me while laughing the whole time. But he did actually hurt me. I would have bruises for weeks. One time he literally shoved my face into stinging nettles, but my naive 15-year-old self thought it was all good and fun. If only I knew then what I would know now. So we started dating at the end of my sophomore year, and over the summer things progressed. He used to beg me to give him massages, and whenever I would refuse, he would pin me down and tickle me until I relented and said yes. And when I stopped before he was ready, he'd go back to tickling me. Sometimes he would just randomly pin me down and tickle me, and I would beg him to stop, but the only way to get him to stop was to literally fight him off of me. And this happened almost every single time we hung out, and I grew to dread it, and I don't know why I kept going back. Honestly, I was just so in love with him. I'm 5'3" and weigh even less than I do now, about 100 pounds, and he's 5'7" and lifts weights for context. And I learned a lot about how to fight someone bigger off of me in those days. And it wasn't just tickling though. As I said before, they used to jokingly beat me up, but the force of his punches was not a joke. I would have bruises all over my arms and thighs from them punching me, and one time, I got in the front seat of our friend's car when he wanted shotguns, so he proceeded to punch my arm the entire 15-minute drive until I was almost crying because I kept trying to move away and tell them to stop. My friend who was driving did nothing. I don't know why. He was even older than both of us, and I don't know why he thought that was normal. It wasn't just punching me either. I had recently gotten my ear pierced, and he thought it was so funny to smack me upside the head, and once he made me bleed, and when I told him, he just said he hadn't. And I tried to talk to him about this so many times, asking, please, just don't touch my ears. And every time I asked, all he would do was correct my grammar. And this was over text. I was honestly scared to say anything in person. And here's an example of me trying to talk to him from August 2021. Now, we ended up breaking up and just staying friends, and I spent all of my free time at his house like an idiot. Another thing he started doing was always wanting to smoke me up, but never smoking himself. Huge red flag, I know, but at the time all I was thinking was more weed for me. And I say all of this to explain what our relationship was like and how utterly confusing this all was for me, and to this day I am still confused why they acted this way. And now for the part where I think he actually tried to kill me. I was 16 now, he was 19, and the day started off normal. We were just hanging out, and from what I remember, this time period is kind of spotty as a memory for me, and the next thing I remember is him sitting on top of my chest and arms, pinning me down like he would normally do to tickle me. But this time, he had both hands around my neck, choking me. Not in a sensual way, like both hands on my windpipe, and I couldn't breathe and could barely talk. And I kept hitting his hands and arms, trying to pull him off my neck. It wasn't working. I was trying to say that I can't breathe, let go of me, but as I said, I could barely talk. And I remember thinking, am I gonna die? Is he really trying to kill me? And the whole time he was laughing and smiling, and I honestly don't remember how I got him off of me, but I think that I must have used my legs and somehow rolled over. The next day, I almost forgot it even happened, until I realized my neck was sore and bruised when I was at school, and I texted him, he left bruises on my neck, and all I got in response was, oh, sorry. And I wish I could say this was the last time I hung out with him, but it wasn't. I actually forgot that it happened until weeks later when I was talking to a friend and she was horrified, so I decided that I never wanted to see him again and texted him that, and he said, that's understandable. And that's all I got. I had no idea what he would have done if we kept hanging out or if I was just a little weaker. Honestly, I don't want to think about it. And I'm posting this here because it's not something I can ever really talk about. Being a guy, the response that I've gotten is, you must have given him the wrong idea. He probably thought that you were just down to wrestle. But now that I'm older, I know what wrestling with your friends is, and it is always a mutually agreed upon thing. Not like that. And I'm still so confused. I'm 19 now and can't imagine treating someone like that. And yeah, our whole friend group at the time called me crazy and said I was overreacting for not wanting to hang out with them anymore, and they essentially cut me out. Hey friends, thanks for listening. Click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. I release new videos every Monday and Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, and there are super fun live streams on Sundays and Wednesday nights. If you got a story, be sure to submit them over at my email, letsreadsubmissions@gmail.com, and you might even hear your story featured on the next video. And if you want to support me even more, grab early access to all future narrations and bonus content over on Patreon, or click that big join button to hear about the extra perks for members of the channel. And check out the Let's Read podcast, where you can hear all of these stories and big compilations located anywhere you listen to podcasts. All links in the description below. Thanks so much, friends. And remember, I'm walking here.